Hey everyone, Genome here, coming at you with the next video in my Marvel Strike Force Beginners series. This is more like a beginner/intermediate video, and this is really aimed at helping newer players or players who are a little bit unsure of what teams to invest in, to kind of help them along and figure out, well, is this going to be worthy of my precious resources? Because as we all know, this is a resource-intensive game, and there's only so much to go around, and especially when you're first starting out, or if you're not spending money on the game, you really got to use those investments wisely. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a breakdown of all of the main major teams in the game currently. Tell you what I think about them really briefly, and then you can make up your mind if it's something you think you should be investing in. All right, so without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to be going in alphabetical order, so it's not like a ranking of teams itself in any particular order, just in alphabetic. So here we go. Starting off with the AIM team. AIM is good just about everywhere except Arena. One real Achilles heel for AIM is it's all sustain, no burst. So basically, the only one on an AIM team doing any appreciable damage is usually going to be Graviton, right? Their sustain is incredible, especially in PvE content when you're fighting the AI, right? Okay, there's a couple good things going for AIM. They can be used actually in DD2, so for the newer player, it is an option. It will take you a year to finish each node, but you're pretty safe usually when you're doing it. So there's that. Scientist Supreme is a decent character on her own, has seen some play in and out of different dark dimensions. And so it's not a horrible thing to put gear into her. I think the biggest proponent, or the best thing I think has going for this team, though, is how stout they are versus the computer in campaign nodes. I think AIM is the preferred team to use in villain 7.1 through 7.3, and even Doom 2.1 and 2.3, or through 2.3, right? You can see the levels that I have right now. They're not exactly high, and it's not even optimum, because AIM Monstrosity should be replaced with AIM Assaulter, but I just had higher stars on, of course, Monstrosity. But these levels allowed me to clear 3-star Dooms, Doom 2.1 through Doom 2.3. And that's saying something. That's getting toward in-game content as far as campaign nodes go. So, extremely versatile team. I would rate them as a good team. Not great or stellar, but there's a lot worse you could do for a new player. Oh, and they don't require that much resource investment, too, which is another nice thing. Alright, so the next team we're going to talk about is the Asgardians. Asgardians are pretty good everywhere. They are not the masters of anything anymore. They were meta for a little while, but they're not a bad team to invest in. Not the least of which is because this is the team that you used to unlock Black Bolt. So getting these guys to 7 stars, all of them anyway, will be something you want to do eventually, but 5 stars to start is the key. They can clear raid node. They don't have really any sustain to speak of, so it's going to be like a one and done kind of thing on the harder nodes, but they can do it. They used to be meta war D. They used to be the best war defense team there was, but they've been kind of power crept out a lot. Symbiotes eat these guys for lunch, and various other teams do as well, so they're just now a good war defense team on the good end of the better teams, or excuse me, on the lower end of the good teams in war D. So they still command a little bit of respect, but it's not like they used to be. But really, one of the biggest boons for this team is just the fact that they help unlock Black Bolt, which is one of the best legendaries in the game, maybe the best legendary in the game as far as newer mid-game players go. So Asgardians are a good, but not a great team. The Astonishing Xmen, I can't really tell you anything about it. This team is completely incomplete, so not much to say there. Most of the mutant teams are pretty decent, but I can't tell you anything about this team yet. The Avengers, the old school non-Wave 1 Avengers, are pretty crap. Only good in Blitz. There's no reason to build a regular Avengers team. Stick to Wave 1, we'll get to that later. Black Order is, I don't know, they're in the top 2 best teams in the game. It's either 1 or 2. It's either them or Symbiotes, really, is the name of the game right now, and we'll see what Doom brings to the team, or to the game later on when more people unlock him, but yeah, there's nothing else to say about them. They're kings of Arena, by far. It's debatable whether they're the kings of War as well. In every other game mode, they're at least amazing, if not the best. Like I said, in raids, I'd probably definitely say Symbiotes are better because of all the sustain and that sort of thing. Maybe even one-on-one in Arena, too, or real-time PvP, RTA. Probably Symbiotes are better, but Amazing team, and the great thing about them is Thanos and Ebony Maw are amazing outside of their team. So lots of good stuff here. I don't think you'll ever regret any investments in Black Order. Okay, Brotherhood. I'm going to be talking about Brotherhood 2.0, and that's basically everyone you see on the top row here. Usually Mystique and Sabretooth are over on Marauders nowadays. But you can use them if that's what you have unlocked, so don't feel like you're hampering yourself too bad, but I definitely think the 2.0 version is the best. So, okay, they are a decent team only, and they're bordering on even a high poor grade, right? They are a top-tier war offensive team. I'd say they're within the top 8 teams for war offense. It's hard to say. A lot of teams can't counter them pretty easily. But, they're still dangerous. They always do command respect. So you can usually punch up against teams that aren't too crazily at the top of the meta, right? These guys dismantle shield pretty well. They're pretty good against Inhumans. There's just lots of little things that they work well against. And I think they're one of the most fun teams to play in the game, easily. But they don't have a lot of use outside of war, to be honest with you. You can use them to clear a raid node or two. They have just enough mitigation to usually come out through the first node unscathed, and they start taking damage usually in the second node. So they can't hang in there for too long, but Blob really helps the defensive capabilities of this team. It helps them last. So they're kind of versatile, and they're actually not a half bad arena team until you start getting to the mid levels, when people start using the more meta teams. So just a decent team. It's nothing I would say to go for early. There's also a nice perk that a couple members of this team will help unlock the legendary that goes with them, right? And Magneto. That being said, do not even bother with this team whatsoever if you don't have Magneto, and I do not recommend you go for Magneto hard as a newer player. So these are more of a nice-to-have team, but they're a pretty decent team overall. Alright, the defenders are useless, completely useless. Don't put anything into them. Even the one thing that used to be good for the block party event, there's other characters that are better for it. So just don't invest in them. The only character you could say was good that used to be on the defenders is the Punisher, and he's not even a defender. So don't waste any money or any resources into these guys. Just don't. Alright, next we have the Fantastic Four. I'm going to go ahead and probably do something unpopular here and label them as a poor. Now, we're not sure how well they're going to react or pair up with Doom. They might not even bother with any synergies there. Time will tell. But really, this team is only good in one mode in the game, and only on one half of one mode of the game for most people, and that's offense on war. So now those who have unlocked She-Hulk have sometimes switched them to defense. It's hard to say. I don't even have She-Hulk unlocked, so I was going to keep them as offense anyway, because they're a pretty good war offense team with Namor. And once again, if you don't have Namor unlocked, don't even bother with these guys in war. It's not worth it. Invisible Woman is a plus because she is a good standalone character on her own. They're legendary. But if you don't have her, once again, definitely don't bother with any of these guys, because no one else on the team is really any good. So yeah, I have to rank them a poor. They're just not good enough in enough game modes. They're not even good in raid node or anything like that. It's very unlikely they'll be able to finish the node on harder difficulties. The Guardians, they are absolutely awful. The team it doesn't unlock its own legendary, which is nice. It should all be like that, but it's not how to make money. They're only useful in easy content. In lower end raids, they're okay, but really the damage is... Rocket's the only one doing damage, and it's not really the best. There's some sustain with Mantis, but no one ever works on Mantis. Usually they're just better to stick Minerva or something on there. Long story short, don't invest anything into these guys unless you're really keen on getting Star-Lord up. They're not used for any late, even mid-game content, let alone late game content. So I do not recommend Guardians really either. They're above Defenders just barely, but I think Defenders actually have more synergy together, and they seem to be a little more fun to play. But yeah, I am not big on the Guardians and don't recommend them. Alright, the Hand. Possibly the most useless tag in the entire game. It's debatable between them and Ravagers. They are used for an event, but really it's not worth investing in these guys whatsoever. The only one actually there's two members worth mentioning just because of the fact they help unlock a legendary. Hand Assassin and Nobu are easier farms than getting to Ala, usually. So one of these two, usually you'll pick. Awful team, don't invest anything beyond what you see here, even this much. I probably put way too much into them as it was. Not good return on investment. There's always rumors of rework, but I haven't seen it yet, so. Okay, Hydra. Hydra is a weird one because there's a few different iterations of it, and one or two characters on this team are really strong, but for the most part, they're only barely even decent, and that's because they're in war. You got war defense on Red Skull side, which has a lot of counters as opposed to when it was first released, and of course Zemo, who tears apart Red Skull teams for whatever reason. Zemo is a top tier character in this game, but everyone else is not that amazing. Red Skull does see some playing RTA, but everyone else is pretty bad, so I'm not going to label these guys a poor just because they're only really useful in one game mode as a team itself. Okay, next we have Inhumans. The Humans are a decent team. I think a lot of people are higher on them than I am. Of course, then again, they probably have Yo-Yo worked on much better than I do, which is very important to the team, obviously, but I just would call them decent. They're really useful in war. They can punch up a little bit on several teams, especially with Yo-Yo maxed out a little more than this, of course. But it's Black Bolt that makes his team what it is. He does all the damage. He provides most of the good buffs with all that massive health that he gives out. And this team does have another good thing going for it, and that's it helps to unlock Ebony Maw. So once again, you're going to want to get all these people to 7 stars eventually. But as for what they'll do for a newer player, it's not good. They might finish one raid node pretty well, but they don't have very much sustain, even with Crystal involved. Other than Black Bolt, no one's doing damage. I mean, once again, Crystal does some, but you got to really invest in her to get anything out of her. And the best character for plug and play other than Black Bolt team, of course, is Yo-Yo, and it's not exactly an easy farm as you can't control it, right? So it's hard to crank her levels up there, and I'm just going to call them decent. I'm sure a lot of people will get on to me about this one, but it's not a team I think the new player needs to go for outside of trying to unlock Ebony Maw. Okay, so Cree. We're going to stick to like Cree minions for the most part. That team itself sucks. It's only useful. Most of the Cree are only useful in like Blitz, but there's a few notable exceptions. At high levels, Ultimus can do some work in war. I've seen it a few times, and he can be pretty dang frightening. High red stars and high gear levels. Ronin is used often for unlocking Phoenix, so there is that going for him. Captain Marvel is of course strong, but she's kind of a floater. She doesn't really have a set team right now, but she is a really strong standalone character. And of course, Minerva is amazing, definitely the best Cree by far, and using the most game modes. But really, their only notable thing is them unlocking Nick Fury, the free minions. And I don't recommend you bother with Nick Fury for quite a while. So, yeah, they're a poor team. I'm sorry. Okay, so the Marauders, man, they are a great team with the right members, right? They are technically still incomplete. They don't have a 5th member with a tag, but they do have Emma Frost, who's a top 5 character in this game, filling out the rest of their ranks, and she has a lot of text that goes with Marauders, so it's a match made in heaven, really. They are a prime war defense team, one of the most annoying teams to go against in the game by far. You'll see them tons at higher level. They're great in arena. A lot of people will swap out Sabretooth, of course, for another character. Just depends on who they have strong or whatever, but even just with using him, it's an amazing team. Sometimes I'll swap them out with Blob if they don't mind breaking up a team. It usually doesn't happen in war, but it'll happen more often in arena, and they're a really good team in war, even facing meta teams as long as they're leveled correctly, right? And their 2 best characters are actually very plug and play. You can use them in lots of different areas in this game. Mr. Sinister, of course, and Emma Frost. The only bad part about it is they're both kind of hard to farm. Mr. Sinister in the War Sword takes a long time, of course, and Emma Frost is right now just an event character in a wallet farm. So, but amazing team, and highly recommended for the later mid-game player to work on. All right, next we got the Mercs. The Mercs are a strange team. I'm going to go ahead and label them as decent, but it's only because of their war defense. They are so strong. One of the, I'd say, top 5 war defense teams out there. Incredibly difficult to go against, and that's all because of Taskmaster for the most part. And of course, they got some buffs to some of the other characters in there, like Merc, Lieutenant especially. But incredibly stout on War D, but don't have a lot of uses in the game outside of that. RTA, you can use them a little bit, and Taskmaster is a pretty decent standalone character, especially in PvP, instances. But yeah, they're not really useful too many other places. Killmonger is going in and out of that team. He's technically supposed to be on the Wakandans, but we all know about Wakandans, and now he might be on Skillety too. So it's one of the best members of the team. There is also a floater. Purely the trifecta is Merc, Lieutenant, Riot Guard, and Taskmaster. Another problem, though, is Taskmaster is a pretty late game farm, right? He is at the final node of Doom War right now, so not the easiest thing to farm and get to. So I don't really recommend that newer players work on this team for a while. They just won't do that much for you in other game modes outside of War. Okay, so this one's gonna be a little bit more, I don't know, ephemeral, but Skillety is what I'm going to call this team. Of course, that's what everyone is labeling it, and that's basically Punisher, Killmonger, Merc Soldier, Yelena Belova, and Red Guardian. Okay, so that's the newest team really that's come out, and there's a lot of mixed feelings about it. I can't really recommend this team for the newer or mid-game player because it's only going to be good in War, basically on War offense, it seems. So it's a lot of investment. These guys are not easy farms, even though there's events going on right now. It's just, the Punisher's a good character, Killmonger's a good character, but Merc Soldier, that's not something you want to be dumping resources in. So I don't recommend newer players work on teams that only do one thing for you, especially in War. I'd prefer you worked on a good raid team first, because you'll get more resources that way. You'll be more helpful to your alliance and all that. So right now, I'm gonna have to rate them a poor, just as opposed to a lot of the other teams that newer players should be working on, and we haven't really seen enough data coming on these guys to give them an accurate reading. But I'm gonna go with poor right now for the newer player. Power armor, I'm gonna label them a poor. They're only useful in War, and really only useful on War offense. And there's a lot of teams out there that's better at it than them. They are a one-trick pony completely. If either Rescue or War Machine goes down, the game is done for you. Before of course, War Machine gets off his ult, or if Rescue gets off her ult. So it's like, I don't know, just not that good. Yeah, there's not much else to say about them. They're only useful one game mode, and they're not having the best at that, so I'm gonna have to label them a poor team. Pentek, as an overall team, I don't have them rated, of course, ranked that high, so it's hard to me to judge. But I'm gonna have to probably label them a poor team for the newer player as well. Not easy farms for 3 of the characters, the newer ones. And I'm not sure how much sustain. I don't know how well they do in raids and all that. Ghost is an amazing character from what I've seen. I just unlocked her actually recently, but all the other ones are not that great. Ant-Man and Wasp are still terrible. Yeah, definitely not a team that I recommend for newer players. I will say that they are going to be used for a legendary unlock with Jubilee coming up, so there's that to consider, but I don't think that's worth hindering your future progress to get for one legendary who we don't know anything about yet. So I'm going to label these guys a poor for now. If you're a Dark Dimension Hound, maybe higher, but I think a lot of people that are even using these people in Dark Dimension aren't using the full team. They're using usually just Ghost. So we'll see. Future will tell, but I'm going to label them poor for now. Ravagers completely suck. There's no reason to level any of these guys. The only decent thing about them is you can sub them in with some Guardians or whatever to unlock Star-Lord. Because for whatever reason, he uses Ravagers too, right, for the unlock. So if you're really keen on getting Star-Lord, you can use a Ravager, because some of them are easy to farm, especially a Ravager Boomer right there in the Blitz store, but don't work on these guys. They're terrible. Alright, the Shield team. Let me start with this. If you don't have Nick Fury, don't waste any time whatsoever on Shield, because he's what makes that team function well. As a straight all-minion team, they might get some PvE content, but really it's Nick Fury that makes the magic happen on this team, which means you had to have worked on Cree minions, and I don't think Nick Fury's worth going for that much, but it is what it is. They are really good, though, for the early and mid-game player if you have Nick Fury. One of the better teams, to be honest with you. It's just a shame that Nick is so hard to get a hold of and tied to such a ridiculous event. But yeah, they have a lot of sustain, decent offense, and they just buff each other like crazy. And Nick is the key to all that. They are also a fairly stout team, or at least they used to be, on war defense with Coulson. That's only if you have Coulson unlocked. Once again, not the easiest thing in the world to do. So I don't recommend that newer players work on this team at all. I mean, if you have Nick Fury, go for it. But once you hit the mid game, you're going to quit using these guys anyway. I do believe you can actually use them through DD2, but why do that to yourself? Because you have to put that much gear and resources into this team, which you're not going to be using in the middle or later middle game. So don't recommend these guys, but they are good when they get rolling in the early mid game. Okay, I'm gonna split this up, but this is basically the same team tag, right? I'm gonna start with the original OG Sinister Six. That's Shocker, Mysterio, Rhino, Vulture, and Green Goblin, right? That team stinks. Let me just tell you right now, it is somewhat decent on war defense because they get deflects automatically with Mysterio's passive, so you don't have to boost them or anything, but they're not going to hold. There's no sustain. They can't handle raid nodes. They don't have very much damage output. They're just not good. The only thing they're good for is unlocking not one but 2 legendaries, which is like the saving grace of them. And a couple of them are easy to farm, like Vulture and Rhino especially. He's a Blitzstore. So, and everyone else has low nodes right now thanks to Doom War. So it's a great time for newer players to be farming these guys, and I'm recommending them as the very first team farm, unfortunately, at least to 5 stars, so you can unlock both Shuri and Invisible Woman. But they're an awful, awful team. They're not good, just to let you know that. Now, let's talk about the Doc Ock Sinister Six team, basically the chargeable Sinister Six. And there's a few different iterations of this, but really it's always got Swarm, Electro, and Doc Ock on there. And usually Mysterio. That 5th slot's kind of in flux right now. Some people are experimenting with Green Goblin, which I like. And some people are just sticking Rhino in there. It just depends what's going on. But they are a prime war offense team. They're actually pretty good in Arena too. Pretty good in real-time Arena. So that team is good. And Doc Ock can be used very well as a plug-and-play character in other teams. So while I am not hugely hip on the Sinister Six really for any game modes in particular other than war offense, they do have some uses, and they may get you through a node of a raid. It's a little bit doubtful, but Doc Ock does have some sustain with him and some defensive tools, so they may get through a raid node or two. But this is not a team that you need to dump tons of resources in early. If you see right now the levels I have them at, this let me unlock Shuri and Invisible Woman at 7 stars, so you don't need to put a ton of resources into them. Now if you plan on using them a lot in war, know which ones you're gonna use for the most part, and gear them accordingly. But not a great team. I'd say just good overall, but almost all that's because only if you have Doc Ock. If you don't, this team is bad, and you should just be using them to unlock legendaries. Okay, next up we have the Supernatural team. One of my favorite teams actually in the game, but they are only just a decent team. They're okay on war offense, but man, they are super squishy. Doc Strange goes down very quickly, even with all those buffs he gets with his passive on enemy team buffing. He gets deflects, but still, a lot of times it's not enough. And if he goes down, the heart and soul of the team goes with him. They can handle a few raid nodes sometimes. So there are just enough self-healing involved in this team and debuffing to allow them to usually cripple the other team pretty well and get through some of the harder raid nodes. I've actually used them U7 for some later nodes when my main team has fallen and I need to go in there and clean up. So it can be done, but they take a lot of investment to get good, and really they don't have a good 5th member right now. Scarlet Witch is awful. I don't even use her on the team. Usually I'll stick Loki or something in there. So they are missing a key element, especially some sort of protection to make them better. But they're only just decent, and they're not really used to unlock anything. And one more initial note, if you don't have Ghost Rider, do not bother with this team. It's not good. Mordo is a decent standalone character, but super squishy. Same with Doctor Strange, and Elsa's a pretty decent blaster as well. But yeah, without Ghost Rider, this team does not work, so just be warned on that. So just decent, nothing you need to worry about early on, though. Alright, next we got the Symbiotes. Symbiotes are an amazing team, either the top team overall in the game or second. It's either them or the Black Order, depending on what you're doing. For raids, I say these guys are king. They have unbelievable sustain, they have unbelievable debuffing, they have unbelievable speed bar manipulation. They're just the total package. You can't kill these guys. I only have anti-venom unlocked, and just the trifecta of Symbiote, Spider-Man, Carnage, and Venom, it'll blow your doors off how good these guys are. Can't wait to get anti-venom unlocked. But not easiest characters to farm. Venom's easy to get a hold of, but he's about the only one that's easy to get a hold of. Carnage is in the War Store, so he's fairly predictable, but it takes a long time to get him going. And I'll say this as well, if you don't have Symbiote Spider-Man, don't bother with him. Because he's really the engine that makes his team work, especially in raids and Dark Dimension and places like that. So an amazing team, definitely worth the investment. Make sure you got them unlocked before you work on them too highly, though, because the individual characters, other than Symbiote Spider-Man, they're not all that great. Okay, the Uncanny Xmen. They are a decent team. They're very strong on war offense. They always have been. They're basically the Swiss Army knife of taking out tough teams, but they're actually getting surpassed in that. Yeah. They can sometimes take out a single node of a raid, especially with Phoenix involved. But they're not going to be able to sustain too well unless you get a really high end beast. And I'm not even sure how well they're going to sustain with that. Yeah, I like to rate them higher, but they're also really good in Arena, by the way, too. Very strong, actually, but you have to have them geared. I'll say this, if you don't have Phoenix, though, don't bother with the team. They're useless without Phoenix, for the most part, and that does definitely bring them down a notch, especially for newer players, because it takes a while to get Phoenix. So, really strong team later on, but they are not a great utility team. They're not just good in every game mode. Like, I would say that as an overall team, I would actually rank AIM a little ahead of them because they can do more in lots of other game modes. But as far as war and arena goes, these guys will trounce, of course, AIM and most other teams in the game. So this team's a little bit in flux. There are going to be some new characters coming up shortly. Possibly, it's hard to tell with the Uncanny and Astonishing tag what they're going to do with the future mutant releases. But so they're just pretty decent. And that's all I'm going to say about those for now. Alright, the Wakandans, they are straight garbage. They have basically two things, maybe possibly three things going for them. Most important is they have the Chaos Theory event, and that comes around monthly, and that is the event where you earn promotion credits, both silver and gold. So that part's invaluable because that's the most important currency in this game. But outside of that, they're completely useless. I do notice, though, that Blitz Sim seems to really weight these guys hard, because I've punched up with these guys quite often, and I know, looking at the teams, there's no way this Wakandans can beat them. So there's something going on with the Blitz Sim there that makes these guys a little bit stronger than they should be. But yeah, the only other good things about them really are Shuri and Killmonger. Killmonger is very flexible and goes on several different teams right now, and Shuri is just a good standalone plug-and-play character, much better off of her team. And yeah, so Wakandans are really, really bad, but with like 1 or 2 saving graces, so don't invest into them too heavily. No more, the minimum you need to do, basically, is what I'm recommending for them. Okay, so we got the Wave 1 Avengers now. They are a deceptively strong team. You do need high levels of gear, though, and red stars on them to really make them work. But I see them all the time down on level. I think people have completely ditched the Defenders now, finally, and are going with these guys. And that works pretty well. Especially if you can get Black Widow. That's not an easy farm for newer players, but if you have her, great. Hulk he's really amazing on this team, but the all-star has got to be Thor. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because Thor is like the central piece on 2 different teams. So do you keep him on Asgardians, or do you put him on Wave 1? Most people will leave him on Asgardians, at least for war defense, but it gets a little murkier in other game modes. Now, they don't really have the sustain to be hanging in raids and all that, so I'm just going to go with a decent team, but they are deceptively strong in war. They can clear a raid node usually, and in Arena you can do a lot worse until you start getting meta teams, so not a bad team. I wouldn't over-invest in them right now, but pretty strong, actually stronger than I thought they were going to be after the rework, so there we go. Alright, X Factor. Who knows? They're completely incomplete. And from my memory, these guys weren't even on xfactor in the old days. Well, at least I know Shatterstar wasn't. He was xforce originally, but whatever. These two look very, very, very strong, though. In fact, I've seen some videos with them paired up with Doom, and they're just killing machines. So who knows? But these guys are strong, so I'm sure the rest of the team will eventually get to be very strong as well. Xforce is, I'm only going to call them decent. They are an exceptionally good war offense team, but they're kind of a one-trick pony. That's all they're good for. Real-time arena too, of course, and maybe regular arena in lower levels. They can be pretty decent if you have a well-invested one, but for the most part, there's just like not much defense to be had here. Domino drops like that, and when she does, Deadpool's useless. You know, just, I don't know. The only really standalone character on this team is X-23. And there's that. So I don't recommend that newer players work on. Plus, it's a lot of late game farm. Domino is random farm. X-23 is in the War Store. Negasonics and was it Doom War 1.9. So I think Cable's pretty far along in the Mystic campaign. So it's not easy stuff. Deadpool's in the Arena Store. A lot more important characters than Deadpool. So while they do unlock a legendary in Doc Ock, which is very nice, this is not a team I don't think any newer, even mid-game dealer needs to worry that much about overly. So I'm just going to call them decent. They only have one real use in this game, war offense right now, and that just doesn't cut it for newer players who need to use their war resources wisely. And finally, we come to the Young Avengers. I'm going to have to label them as poor. Really, they're missing a character, and what they have is only used in niche areas, you know. Sometimes you see them on war, but very rarely, usually in some sort of brawler team. Just not that good. They're not really using any of their game modes other than that. Maybe some early arena, but I see no reason to really invest in these people. The only one that's even remotely necessary is Miss Marvel, just because she helps to unlock Ebony Maw eventually, but I really wouldn't work on these guys at all. As you can see, I haven't. So that's it. So there we go. That is my quickie team review. So hopefully that's helpful to newer players out there who are a little bit confused on what all the teams do well, what teams are worth investing in with your earlier resources, and which ones you think you can grow into nicely. A lot of the teams on this list are only good in one thing, and I don't think that's not good enough for early game players. They need to do multiple things well, and then as you start broadening that, then you can start working on more specialized teams. But focus, get a couple really strong meta teams if you possibly can, stuff that works well in various game modes, and it just makes your life so much easier. So hopefully this video was helpful to you, and if it was, let me know in the comments below. I ask you to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll have more Marvel Strike Force content coming up in the near future. Alright, well, this is Genome.